Oh, fantastic. All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Brain Club. First, I guess I'll introduce myself. Mel Hauser, Executive Director of All Brains Belong. I've got pale skin and a brown short hair, and I am in a background of kind of aqua with a light post. We are here to talk about a very important and dear topic to me, and that is shame. Shame is something I knew nothing about until recently, and yet it is like an everyday, all day thing that kind of defines my existence and the existence of like most people I spend my day interacting with. Like, in fact, like all the people. And in fact, nobody talks about this. And if we talk about this, it won't be the defining thing. So that's what we're gonna do today. Because March is Unlearning Month here at All Brains Belong. We talked we had a brain club during February about the idea of brain rules versus world rules. Brain rules are like those things that we tell ourselves are universal life truths, but like we made them up or someone else made them up. And just because a lot of people have the same brain rule, like a collective brain rule, a cultural brain rule, does not in fact make it a world rule. A world rule is like, thou shalt not hit people in the head. I should be able to run the Zoom. That's a brain rule. So I got this picture up here. This is a winding mountainous trail at Yosemite National Park. The idea of the path of unlearning, like we got no idea where it's going. It might be beautiful. It might be hard. It might be all the things. Speaking of all the things here are okay here at Brain Club. You can have your video on, video off. Do not look at the screen. Looking at the eye contact with Zoom is like such a collective brain rule, by the way. So move, eat, fidget, have pets and kids and all the things, and type in the chat box, hit the raise hand button, call stuff out, mix and match. Everything's okay. My presentation today is going to have 3 parts. I'm going to define shame. I'm going to connect that to something called ableism. And I'm going to invite you to reflect on some things that maybe you've not thought about, maybe you have. And ableism and internalized ableism, which is a very, very common pathway to shame. So what is shame? I'm wondering if anyone feels like being brave, either calling it out or typing the chat. When I say the word shame, what comes to mind? Oops. Give you a minute to think. Except I can't see the chat even if you participate. There we go. Feeling bad about who I am, or parts of myself outside my control. Flushed face, looking down, withdrawing internally. Yeah, we've all felt shame. Brene Brown is I got another one. Guilt is something I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And that distinction can make a huge, huge lens shift for folks. Guilt, I did something bad. Shame, I am bad. Brene Brown is a sociology researcher who studies shame. And she defines shame as the painful emotion of feeling unworthy, broken, defective, deficient. Oh yeah. And the thing is, we all experience this. We may just not use that word to define it. We might just feel really, really bad. And in my experience, in supporting people through this and living this as a human, as a parent, as in all the things, when we have our most profoundly intense dysregulation episodes, later on reflection, almost always those episodes can be tied back to shame. And one of the most powerful tools of regulation, self-regulation, co-regulation, is to find the shame. You know, what was it? Brene Brown has a 4-step. This is like one of my favorite books, by the way. Come on, move, Tim. This book, I thought it was just me, but it isn't. Highly recommend. And she walks you through a 4-step process of like identifying shame, naming it, telling someone, I feel shame. And then almost always the other person says, me too. I've lived that, I've felt that. But then later, kind of the higher level processes of like, where did find the shame? Like, why did this trigger me? What is it about that? What's the story I'm telling myself? Where did it come from? And oftentimes it's a story, you know, a narrative we created as little kids to try to make sense of the world. Problem is we were little kids. We saw something, no one gave us a way of understanding it. We made up a narrative. We hardwired it and rehearsed it millions and millions and millions of times. And it comes back, triggers the shame. And then like higher level stuff, zooming way out, how was I set up for this trigger? You know, what is it about the culture? What is it about my environment that led me to come up with that original narrative? So, oops. I'm going to play a video. And I think I have to unshare. Oh no, here we go. Share sound. All right, can you guys see this? Somebody can just shout out that you see that. That would be amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. All right, so gonna rewind. Sweet little love.
1, take a shower. You don't want to smell. 2, pick out an outfit that will fit in with the latest trends and won't make you the laughing stock of the school more than you already are. 3, put on some makeup so you can actually show your face in public and be a little bit pretty. You can't even recognize yourself and your face tingles with an unrelievable itch you can't satisfy, otherwise you will have ruined the hours of meticulous painting you applied to your hideous face. 4, don't forget to style your hair in elegant curls. You can't let everyone at school see how your hair frizzes up like an electrocuted monkey, naturally. 5, shove your fat feet into those toe-pinching, blood-blistering Converse that everyone at school is wearing, and you cannot be the odd one out. As you gaze into the bathroom mirror, you see a stranger that somehow stole your reflection and replaced it with a completely different girl. Every part of your outfit is uncomfortable, but even though you spend hours trying to look pretty, you will never be as good as those other girls at school. You are actually holding back a few tears, but you feel like you are holding back a tsunami of emotion. You can't let anyone else know that you feel, otherwise they will never respect you the same way they used to. Or did they ever?
What comes up for people watching that in the chat or just shout it out?
Why am I not good enough?
Stop. Okay, great. Okay. Relatable, familiar. So what? Yeah, sir, go ahead. Somebody say something. No, okay. Anytime there is a default, this is how it's done. This is how you dress. This is how you communicate. This is how you play. This is how you do this social thing. Anytime a kid is told that, shown that it's almost always going to set people up for creating a narrative of shame. Because if you, as a sweet little love, do a thing, and then someone or someone's in your environment tell you that that thing is not a thing, going to feel defective, deficient, inadequate. And yet when we think about all the defaults in our society, in school, and even sometimes in our own homes because of all of our brain rules, it's like this intergenerational cycle of shame. And then that leads us to the intersection of shame and ableism. Ableism is the discriminatory belief that it is superior to be able. Ableism is largely missing from the social justice conversations, but similar to all the other isms, racism, genderism, all the isms, the belief consciously or subconsciously that it is actually superior to be a thing. The difference here in ableism is that like consciously, lots of people actually believe that it is superior to be able to do the thing, including people who, because of barriers in the environment, like let's say, for example, if I am a wheelchair user and I approach a building with a ramp, I am going to have more ability to access that environment than I am if I show up at a building that does not have a ramp. So when we as, oh yeah, all right, so I got a comment in the chat. Yeah, frustrating that ableism not prominent in social justice. Absolutely, nobody talks about this. So when we are, let's say we're a little kid, or at school, and we're given like some math problems on the board, and everyone else is doing the thing. We learn math differently. We have the kind of brains that learn math with our hands and need to kind of like see some, we can't do visual spatial stuff in our heads. We have to do it out in front of us. But if somebody gave us manipulatables, we'd be able to do the thing. But everybody else around us is learning the math from the board, just kind of in writing, or they're getting auditory instructions and they process that fine. But I have the kind of brain that takes in information visually better than auditorily. And so you look around, everyone's doing the thing as the default way, and I actually think that it would be superior to do the thing the way the other people are. And all of those like microaggressions that are stacking up over the course of a day in the life of a little kid at school. And now you're a 40-year-old. I mean, think about that internalized belief of deficiency and defectiveness. No one tells a little kid that 1 in 5 people think, learn, communicate differently than the default way that's being presented. Hold on, my video. Come on, man. No, I want you to play. And I want you to start over.
So what is ableism? Ableism is part of a larger group of isms that includes racism, sexism, ageism, and so on. Ism beliefs often devalue certain groups or individuals based on characteristics they can't control. Ableism is a learned belief that people with typical abilities are superior to those with physical or cognitive disabilities. When we see ableism around us, it appears as a prejudice toward people with disabilities. It can be demonstrated consciously or unconsciously through words and actions. Language is one of the most powerful ways we connect with each other. Unfortunately, ableism shows up in our language all the time. You've probably heard of social media campaigns that ask people to stop using the R word. The R word, or retarded, was once a legitimate medical term to describe people with cognitive disabilities. But over time, people began using this word to describe all kinds of bad things. The result was that the R word became associated with being bad or wrong. Using the R word today is not only ableist, it's considered hate speech. Euphemisms are another way that ableism shows up in our language. A euphemism is a word or expression that is substituted for something else that is considered too harsh, blunt, or embarrassing. Imagine how you might feel if something about you was so bad or embarrassing that others felt ashamed to even talk about it. Common disability euphemisms include differently abled, handy-capable, mentally challenged, and special needs, just to name a few. Disability scholars and self-advocates label these terms as patronizing because they reinforce the belief that disability is an undesirable state. Instead of
So the words in everyday language, where's my things? Okay, great. You know, the words in everyday language, the actions in everyday language, the simple assumptions that are made about how, like, well, everyone does this way, or everyone can do that, or that's so easy. If you think about how many times subtle privilege infuses into everyday life that is going to contribute to a narrative of brokenness, because how could it not? When we as kids don't know that the way we fundamentally like intuitively inherently are is a thing, we're going to make up a narrative and we're going to reinforce it. And now here we are as adults trying to unlearn that. And it's hard though. It's hard though, because it's so hardwired, and especially when we're dysregulated, we're going to default to those hardwired beliefs, that narrative we came up with in childhood. By taking on this lens of just like recognizing it, it's the opportunity to like view your own everyday interactions differently. And I'll give some examples in a minute. Because that internalized ableism, that fundamental belief of not being good enough, being defective, being broken, how is that not going to impact, you know, not just self-concept, self-esteem, but like all of the interpersonal relationships, personal and professional, all of these interactions, and at least being able to zoom out and say, oh, what's the story I'm telling myself? Where did it come from? And is it ableism? So here's the story. I don't know, guys, if you can see this picture. This is me with chocolate syrup all over my coat and my pants, and I used to have been wearing a dress. I was on my way to work the other day, and I stopped at a restaurant to pick up some takeout. I am dyspraxic, and I know that motor coordination when I'm stressed and running around and rushing and carrying things, like, I mean, it's gonna take more brain power that I did not have available. So when I pick up the takeout, I said, hey, can I have a bag? And you know what she says? She says, oh, well, those bags they're big, you know, it'd be a lot easier for you just to like hold it. So when I tell the story, like obviously I can name the thing, but in the moment, me, even though I'm someone who knows better, about this all the day, I say, oh yeah, I should be able to carry that. So I carry the thing, and I'm holding the bag, and I'm holding the box, and I'm holding the keys, and like, what do you think happens? I am covered in sauce. And, you know, I can tell this story with a little bit of a smirk and a little bit of a, you know, and it's all right. But now I'm going to tell you the story of the 7-year-old sweet little love. I met a child last week who told me, Dr. Mel, I'm bad. And I said, what do you mean? You're a sweet little love. What do you mean? My teacher hates me. What do you mean? I mean, she's probably just dysregulated. Everybody's dysregulated. It's all the thing. Everybody's dysregulated. It's the thing. No, it's me. I pick up her energy. And I say, oh, maybe it's just energy. She yells at me. She yells at me because I'm running around all the time and I can't stop moving. And I say, oh, sweet little love. You have the kind of brain that learns better when you're moving. You have the kind of brain that actually, when you're moving, your little internal GPS in your ear actually processes auditory information better. Oh, you sweet little love, you have figured out how to attend and regulate and learn. And then he says, she gave me a frowny face for the day. What do you mean frowny face? Well, I get a happy face when I'm good for the day and a frowny face when I'm bad. I said, what does it mean to be good and bad? And he says, well, when I flip my lid, I get a frowny face. I said, sweet little love, you're telling me that when you flipped your lid because the environment, sorry, I forgot this detail. Recess was taken away because the work was not done. Got to skip recess to do the work, you know, the work that wasn't able to be done because the movement was inhibited and prevented and prohibited. So you didn't do the work because the environment would not allow you to do the work in your way, and then punished by taking away the very thing that your brain needed. And then you get a frowny face because you flipped your lid, because all of the regulatory mechanisms that you yourself were seeking out, you were told they were bad. Oh my goodness. Anyway, I started crying during the visit, and I tell the story like all the time now because it is everywhere. It is everywhere. When we tell sweet little loves that the way that we are intuitively feeling in our bodies is wrong because there's a just so way to be, what do we expect is going to happen? So I'm going to stop talking. I made this really brief because I wanted to talk. I wanted to hear what this is like for people. In the chat, raise your hand, shout it out, whatever. How does this impact you? In the chat, I hear, even at work as adults, I feel this way. Okay, yes. Yeah.
I've got kids in the background, so I apologize. But
no way. We do that here.
So I teach in a nursing program, and I think one of the things that comes up a lot in our conversations as faculty is we have these accommodations that happen in the classroom setting in a more controlled environment. And then the discussion is always, but what are they going to do in the real world? We can't have these accommodations in real life. So what are we going to do? And it's a fascinating conversation to me, because we want to prepare people to be equipped to do the job in the environment, accepting what the environment is. But there is that auto exception that the environment is unchangeable. That's what it is. And you need to be ready for that, without really thinking about, how can we change the environment and what can we do to make it work with people. And I think we're very aware in healthcare of that the environment needs to meet the patient's needs, but a lot less aware of that, that the people working are people too, who might also need that environment to meet their needs. And I just always find it an interesting, I don't have a lot of answers on it, but I find it really interesting, the assumptions that we make about who is abled and who is disabled and who's allowed to have needs and who's not allowed to have needs.
Thank you for that as a comment in the chat. Agreed. Excellent point. I would say about that that's a great example of where distinguishing between brain rules and world rules is really important. Because again, like that thing you said about you got to prepare the people for the real world. I mean, I've heard that a million times, and it's still a brain rule. It's not a thing. And just because something is a generalized collective brain rule does not in fact make it a world rule. And I think that, the solution we have control over right now is educating sweet little loves right from the very beginning that we all have different brains that do things differently. You got to figure out how your brain does the thing and name it. And to be aware that the people around you, they don't know the thing. It is assumed when you're a little kid that the grown-ups know the things. We're the grown-ups now, and we didn't start out knowing the things. We've had to do a lot of unlearning and creating new brain rules, and that's really hard. So I'd say, like, for students who have been able to access accommodations, we say, how awesome is that you have figured out how you learn, and let's figure out, practice how to make sure that you can advocate to get this like everywhere, because you actually found something that works. Like, so for example, let me give you a quick example of that. So I did not know that I benefit very much from closed captioning during everything. And in fact, I had a patient, an 8-year-old patient, teach me this. He says, Dr. Mel, I wish life had closed captions. And I was like, how interesting. I'm so interested as a new patient. I said, I'm so interested in like what this means about your processing. Turns out I have a very similar brain. And really, there are lots of people for whom closed captioning has nothing to do with your ability to hear. It is, synchronizing auditory visual input, anchoring attention, accounting for processing speed. There's like all kinds of people that benefit from closed captioning. Anyway, so I use it in pretty much all of my telemedicine visits, and I show everyone how to turn it on and what to do. And everyone's like, ooh, I didn't know. And so now you learned a thing and you advocate for it, and you have to just sort of like own it, that this should just be a thing for everyone everywhere. You don't wait for someone to ask for an accommodation. You just set it up and you offer it, and you give people freedom and choice to access the way they want. And when I name that to neurotypical abled people, I usually get like an, oh yeah, but it's the privilege. It's like I didn't have to think about this, that people don't talk about. And the chat says, yeah, children with there's more. Children with disabilities grow up into adults with disabilities. Somehow people don't connect the dots. Oh, absolutely. And closed captions in real life would be awesome, so I don't have to ask someone to repeat what they said twice when my brain catches up. Right.
Hey, and Mel, can I add something to what you're saying?
Yes, please.
So I actually am very passionate about this because I I recently got into an argument with a family member actually about accommodations to all human beings, and doing it in a way that doesn't ostracize, kids in particular who have ways of processing differently. And I was talking with this family member about how school could be restructured to learning environment versus, like I'm going to put these kids in this classroom and these kids in this classroom, and all these kids have to gel together. And I don't understand sometimes how school can't be broken up into sensory seeking kids or kids that need to move in order to learn the information. And there's a room to do that. And then if somebody needs like a quiet space to learn something, then they can be in a quiet space, because basically this family member was talking about how my daughter may need to be in a different classroom or a classroom that is more geared to accommodate her. And my thought was, how much better would all kids learn if all kids were accommodated this way? That it wasn't, here's the disabled kid, quote unquote, who needs this environment to learn. Like, what if we tailored the learning environment to all the kids in the grade, and that they could learn in whatever style suited all of them? And then there would be no need to ostracize kids with quote unquote disabilities, because every kid that learns by being mobile would be in the same group together. They could all run around and learn things the same way. I just don't understand why teaching isn't tailored that way. But yeah, it was really hard because they were like, well, how would you do that? And I was like, I don't know, but let's have the conversation. I think it's so heartbreaking sometimes as I was the kid in school that was told I was too talkative, too loud, too, excitable in the class, couldn't sit down and be quiet. But it's like, how different would my life have been if the learning was tailored to fit my style? I kept being put in the like gifted, but not really succeeding class. And that, like, talking about how it ties to shame, like I have a lot of difficulty now as an adult being able to accept how I learn and own it, like you were talking about owning it, and I think there would just be a lot more acceptance for like a lot more inclusiveness between all neurotypes if like the work world was also structured this way. It baffles me sometimes, but I really like that we're having this conversation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. And there's a comment in the chat. I so resonate with you, Janelle. It's the comment in the chat. And Tyler points out this is called universal design. So universal design, that's our model at All Brains Belong, which is that you have flexible, multimodal ways of engaging, of doing all the things, and you create an environment, and you think about all the different types of learning and access, and you offer all the options. And yeah, that is best practice. It's challenging because I think, what are the barriers? Because there are, we know so many really like educators who get it, but feel constrained by the collective brain rules, or who become so dysregulated, by like the institutional trauma and even just like in the, if you, for example, if you've got like a room full of dysregulated people, and you as the adult, you're just like trying to survive. I mean, how do you even do that? You don't have time to like innovate and plan and like invent your own system. It's brain rules. The other thing I would say is that when a young child, I'm the mama of a 5-year-old, and we've been talking about brains since probably 2.5. If you can teach little kids that we all have different brains that like think, learn, communicate, process sensory information differently, if you can name that in toddlerhood, it becomes their narrative. It becomes like, yeah. And it's not just brains, it's like gender identity, it's like everything. You name that stuff early. And actually, in 2 weeks, we're having a brain club about talking about gender identity with young kids and unlearning those brain rules. Anyway, but the point about young kids, for everybody figuring out how their brain works, and like, yeah, that would be the ideal. It's kind of, and last point I'll make about that Janelle, you came to mind for me. As an adult, pre-COVID, I used to go to yoga retreats at Kripalu. And at Kripalu, you get to choose whether you want to be in the quiet dining room or the talking dining room. That's easy. That was so easy. If even just school lunch could have a no talking dining room, oh my gosh, they would change people's lives. How else is this stuff landing on folks?
Mel, just another comment about talking about the other isms. It always amazes me, like the word ableism, I'm finding isn't very well known to a lot of people. And that always surprises me that I think we've come a long way in a lot of the isms in terms of talking about them more openly. And it feels like we've got a long way to go for progress on ableism. Are you finding similar trends with people you're talking to?
Absolutely. I mean, what I think some of the many things that distinguish this bucket from all the other buckets of isms is that we've got so many people with invisible disabilities who don't even know they have invisible disabilities, and who have internalized ableism. And my observations are that some of the, remember, if you missed the brain club on brain rules and world rules, I'm going to actually send out the link to the recording with the recording of this one because they go nicely together. Is the idea of like the brain rules are a cognitive self-regulation thing. Like you make up a brain rule in order to feel better. And so if you made up a brain rule about, well, I should be able to do the thing, and I'm going to do the thing, and I'm going to like spend 30% more battery power to do the thing, you make a brain rule, you actually are potentially more likely to judge and discriminate against someone else with the same disability you have because of your brain rules that were protective of you at the beginning, but like kind of set you up to have conflicting access needs. Comments in the chat. Luckily, the dialogue on disability is sparking up due to long COVID. Yeah, because particularly because the neurodivergent population is at increased risk of long COVID, and it is an ableist premise for we as a community to be put at risk because of generalized collective brain rules of decision makers. Comment in the chat, I think people without disabilities take a lot of ableism for granted and don't think about how their world is ableism. Absolutely, it's abled privilege. Maybe some more examples would be good. Oh, yeah. I'll give an example right now, especially examples of ableism in the life of someone with invisible disabilities like autism. And the next comment, I almost wish we could have an ADA crash course to get better educated about confronting ableism in schools or with employers and making sure our rights aren't being infringed upon. Comment, yes. Just feeling like my childhood was taken from me. I so wish that my parents were not stigma filled and allowed me to be properly diagnosed. Which, by the way, back in the day, I don't know that even would have happened. And I think many late recognized neurodivergent adults go through that, like what might have been, and get like resentful of all the people that missed all the things. If you think about, people don't even know now. People know stigma. Stereotypes. People don't know. And so, 30 years ago, they definitely didn't know. So I'm trying to remind myself of that for just in my own life, because anyway, even though looking back, you're like, how did you not know? All right, now as an adult that's just been diagnosed, I feel so ill prepared. I had to make my own rules to help me survive. Tyler gives some examples. Look me in the eyes when you're talking. Oh, yes. So here's the thing. Remember, 1 in 5 people are going to think, learn, communicate differently than the like so-called default way you do the things. You know, what I do now as an adult who has some social capital, fortunately, I try to model this so that people can like practice it, is to say like, hey, you know, I have the kind of brain that listens better when I look away, and just name that. I've never had anybody say something about me, but the assumption of the default is that somebody made a brain rule at some point who said, look people in the eye, otherwise people will think you're not paying attention. That's a brain rule, collective brain rule. Or I have to look people in the eye or they will think I'm disrespecting them. Well, somebody told you that as a kid. Anyway, and then now you are the adult requiring that of someone. There are many brains that listen better when they're looking away. Or a lot of times I'll be talking to someone, even now, I'm like looking over there because I'm a verbal processor. Oh, did you know that some people have no idea what they're going to say before they start talking, and they figure it out as they talk or as they write? Those are verbal processors. People don't know that. Anyway, now I know that, and that's me. So when I am processing something that I've never thought about before, I always look away, but I tell people. And if we can just tell all the people to start doing that, then there won't be stigma, I think. Don't fidget. Yeah, because people don't know about brains. People don't know that many brains actually process information better when they're getting proprioceptive input. Whether that's by movement or holding a focus tool. I'm just gonna let more people in. Your child needs to learn how to pretend play. They just can't play with Legos all day. Yeah, oh my gosh, how ableist is that? All of the neurotypically biased, abled, Yeah, so what I like to say to people about that is I like to say, play is the pursuit of joy. Did you know that only you get to decide what brings you joy? And then people are always like, oh yeah, and yeah, so that, yeah, play is play. And the assumption of skills deficits underlying play is common. Comments in the chat. I've cried for childhood me often after my diagnosis. Oh yeah. Anything that assumes that people who are neurodivergent wish they were not. Oh yeah. I think that there are so many, it's actually, I remember I was actually, Danielle Kent, who is a speech language pathologist on the ABB board of directors. She once taught me something about like the importance of loving your brain. Loving your brain. Like, how many people totally don't love their brain? And there's so many challenges, like real challenges, like real things that really get in the way, that are worse when the environment is set up to make me spend all of my brain power on things that shouldn't be things. But you got to get to that point of the loving your brain part, like the things that your brain uniquely does. And that's really hard when you've been chronically invalidated and shamed your whole life. So often that first step of figuring out your brain, reframing, like having that whole lens to review your previous narrative and the lens to view the daily interactions and meeting other people who go through the exact same thing, finding your neurokin. Another example in the chat, teacher says, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, demanding eye contact. And assuming seeing, like, yeah, so assuming that people, yeah, right, exactly, so many assumptions, right? And that's the whole deal about universal design, that you would present information in multimodal formats so that people can take in the information however they're taking in. But if, I think that the teacher says 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. So where'd that come from? I don't know. I'm just imagining that at some point in teacher training, somebody saw someone do that as a way of like establishing control, right? So if I'm a person, let's say I'm a person with, let's say I'm me, and I'm in a room of 30 people, and there's like visual and auditory chaos, and I'm flipping my lid, what's the first thing I do? I go back to my original brain rule that says, holy, shut it down. You know, and like I bring back that thing, that over rehearsed automatic pathway, like even me in my house, like all the new brain rules I make, they are in a state of dysregulation to try to make the world to make more sense. It's like just conflicting access needs. Comment, I look at hairlines or eyebrows to fake, right, exactly. I had a meeting with someone recently who was explaining to me about like, oh, you know, like apologizing for not making eye contact. I was like, I'm never making eye contact ever, just naming the thing. Stop pretending to be XYZ. People don't act like that. Yeah. People don't act like that, as though you could make a statement about how all people act. I mean, that's so common. Comment, I do so much of this with my own kids without thinking. It can be so difficult to reverse these deeply entrenched ideas and habits. Or how you identify. I've been corrected by neurotypical people to use person-first language, person with autism, where we know that the majority of autistic people experience autism as part of our identities and use identity-first language. I even find, like, when I'm giving a presentation to professional audiences, and I always use identity-affirming language, I feel, because it's brain rule, that the people are going to judge me, so I teach them first, like, I'm using this language because it's the thing to do. But I feel the need to explain that. Another brain rule: socializing at the dinner table is a must. We must eat and socialize. Whereas for autistic individuals and others, eating is a huge sensory processing, and it's so much, yeah. So the brain rule of, you know, family dinner is like the key to mental health, and it's like, you know, like I was taught that in medical school, you know, it's like the thing. So I'm a parent, family dinner, we must do the family dinner. Family dinner is like a disaster. I mean, what's the point? The point of dinner is to eat. And, you know, the point of family is to connect. They do not, it's a brain rule that they need to be done at the same time. You know, so my child is often like, you know, leaving the table. So there's the proprioceptive need to, you know, move. There's the, like the postural support of the chairs. There's this, you know, like the scraping of the fork on the plate, and the people, hearing the people chewing, like, oh, it's just, brain rule. Anyway, so as soon as, you know, like, just as a parent, a personal experience, like giving up on family dinner, and like you do your connection separately from your eating, like such a happier household. Yeah, I don't love my brain is the comment. Yeah, great. It's a journey. It's a journey. Having a meltdown is not okay. It's a tantrum and must be punished. Oh, of course that's ableist. So, especially because it's the environment that set up the meltdown. Remember, meltdown is like an overload. It's an involuntary manifestation of dysregulation. It's your body communicating that things are not okay. And yeah, the kids get punished. Well, actually, so they're punished in different ways. Oh, there's no punishment. Yeah, well, punishment looks in different ways. Hi, Elsa. Looks like Elsa came. Anyway, so the idea being that when someone's dysregulated, what do? We isolate them, shame them, and we're like surprised when people are dysregulated. And remembering that when you have the emotional experience of being shamed and isolated, you be back in that environment, downstairs brain knows and remembers that experience, you're gonna be much more likely to be dysregulated again. It's this loop and loop and loop. Because when people don't feel included, they're dysregulated because it feels terrible to everyone, right? Yeah. More comments. I was hanging off the chair as a kid, needed to eat and run. Too many people. Yeah, chaos. Yeah. So comment about, like, you know, bad parenting causing behavior with people having no interest in how the child's brain works, for sure. Right. A great book, if you've not read Uniquely Human by Barry Prezant. The idea is that with any, like, just, you know, any behavior, you, like, first step is, like, you know, wondering, being curious about why this happened. You know, and mostly always it's it's I don't like intuitively, like if you really take a step back for yourself and for other people, you can kind of figure out what happened. It doesn't necessarily need to be something that happened right then. Maybe it's the cumulative impact of being in this like completely disabling environment. It takes its toll. I want to play actually. So if others have comments either in the chat or out loud or however, go for it. I'm going to pull up a video that my 5-year-old found that is the key to the universe. Oh, goodness gracious. Hold on. Put it in the All Brains Belong Facebook group. Try to pull it up. Yeah, okay. Zoom. And a comment in the chat. Another comes to mind, the use of the words crazy and insane. Absolutely. Yeah. If for anyone who's not on our Facebook group, we have a whole thread on like terms, ableist terms and stuff. Yeah, it's not hard for your child. You're just making it hard. They need to travel and things would be easier. Yeah, right. The idea that you can expose someone to their dysregulated trigger and make them regulated. No, you're forcing them to mask. You're driving brain body disconnect that says you're, like that thing your downstairs brain recognizes. That's not a thing. And then we wonder why people don't trust their intuition, don't love their brain, or are higher risk of victimization. We're teaching people. Yeah, the idea that masking is an improvement, right? Which is why research that shows that any particular interventions, that are driven around compliance with an abled, neurotypically biased measure, any right, yeah, it works. Yeah, to what end is the idea is. Yeah, so the comment in the chat, so a participant states ABA in general is horrendous, right? And there's an extensive body of research about PTSD in ABA participants. And so challenge being that there's a lot of brain rules around even clinical interventions, right? Brain rule of there must, evidence-based medicine. Yeah, there's going to be research that shows that a particular thing, like you do this method and more eye contact. Well, why are we measuring more eye contact? Should be measuring like good life. So here we go. I'm going to share again, share, send, share. Okay. All the windows.
Many years ago, a girl was born into the family of a wise lap wizard. Even as a young child, she displayed more powers than many wizards of the north. Her name was Irma, and her peers admired her for her extraordinary gifts. But those who could not understand what she was discriminated against her. Irma couldn't fit into the real world.
Hey Mel, is very black right now.
Because she was different.
What'd you say?
The screen is black.
The
I don't
screen
know
is
if anyone
black.
else can see the picture.
Oh no! Thank you for telling me that. How
You're welcome.
terrible. So
I
what's
just
it
assumed
black?
it was black screen the whole time. I was waiting for a picture to come.
Oh no! And I'm hearing I'm thinking it's the best thing ever. Thanks for telling me. All right, we're gonna watch this on YouTube. All right, here we go. Oh no! I don't want the whole thing.
But all those who disliked me turned into ice.
I think I'm just gonna.
Hatred weakened her heart, and the cold took.
Stop. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, here we go. I am going to find the original. Sorry, guys. Okay, now I'll go again. Share. Can you see now YouTube? Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, Elsa.
Is Master Vigard's mirrors. Many years ago, a girl was born into the family of a wise lap wizard. Even as a young child, she displayed more powers than many wizards of the North.
Still black.
What? All right,
Her name was...
Oh my goodness.
Maybe you can send the link to us in the chat
That's a great idea. And I'll also send it out. I'll send it out by email too. I just really want this to work. Try one more time. So is the idea that when I have YouTube on right now, you can see it, but as soon as I press play, it turns black, or can you not even see this?
Can't even see that.
Oh.
It's just a black screen. We can hear the audio, but not the actual screen.
And even see the closed captioning on the YouTube video, but the video itself is just black.
How about now?
I think
Still black.
It has to do with
Still black.
probably blocking it.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Nothing's happening, just black. All right, that's okay. I'll send it out. I'll send out the link. It's so good. But isn't this interesting, right? Like, I would say even a few months ago, if this had happened, I would have been flipping my lid, because I'm like giving a talk and I can't make technology work. And I'm like feeling like I would have felt really bad about myself because there's something about me that makes this not happen. But like truly and authentically, I was like, YouTube, Zoom, and like that's really helpful, really helpful. But it's like the whole road of really working at this every day, like all day, to like unlearn that brain rule. And anytime I see, especially a young kid, say something like, well, like, oh, I didn't do the thing. I take that point. I'm like, oh, did you know that we all do that thing differently? And that is real, because that's true. It's true, but no one talks about this. So we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this with everyone that we interact with, because it comes up literally in every single interaction. Including when I have a conversation with, even like 3-year-olds, like, even typically developing 3-year-olds, they'll say something about, something they did, and I'll say, oh, isn't that interesting that your brain did that this way? My brain does that way. We all have different brains. And like just building that story from the ground up, it's not hard at all. Little kids are just like, okay, cool. And then if it's an older kid and they're like, they seem like, why have I never heard this before? That's weird. I say, like, no, we're grown-ups. We're learning new stuff. We didn't used to know that stuff. Now we know. Because one of the points earlier about, like the different, having different sensory experiences, different environments in school would be that, if we think about 1 in 5 people, but yet like, in my local school district, I think only like, so that's 20%. 2% of people have kind of been identified to have learning differences. Where's the other people? The other people are the me's and the you's in the world who like are quietly or not quietly creating
They're
brain
masking.
rules.
They're masking.
Masking, right. Any other comments, questions? I really appreciate everyone being here. I really appreciate, your interest and engagement in this really important topic. And I invite you to, to just like try on that lens in your day-to-day interactions of, is this a brain rule or a world rule? And is this, anytime I speak critically to myself, is this actually internalized ableism?
Someone asked in the chat if you could explain what masking is.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yes, thanks. Sure. Thank you for that prompt. So masking or camouflaging is the idea of first intentionally, but then subconsciously, basically hiding your true self in order to appear, normal or typical. And it starts out as a yeah, it's a great link in the chat. So thanks, Tyler, for that link. And in most instances, the subconscious masking or pretending is a safety survival skill, for example. And particularly when we think about the intersectionality of multiply marginalized folks. I mean, masking can sometimes be the difference between life and death, like really. And it's awful that's true. And so it can be controversial sometimes to think about, like people who are, able to mask versus not. It's really just like zooming way out. I would say that debate is less important of just like, there shouldn't be defaults, and we should learn about the many different ways in which people show up in the world, and trying to understand the many ways in which dysregulation presents in the world. And what I'd really like to see is I'd like to see that this topic being discussed in not just school and healthcare, but like in all the major social infrastructures. And actually, like locally here, when I've had conversations about ableism, universal design with like local business, like people are like, oh yeah, I never thought about it, and teach me about that. I don't know how to do that. Or if I give feedback about like, actually this meeting maybe could be facilitated in a more neuro-inclusive way. Like people have been, they've been open, and that's been great. It's comment in the chat, not forcing or shaming each other to be proud neurodivergent because it's maybe unsafe for the person to do so. Absolutely, great. I mean, this is about identity formation. It's about negotiating really difficult, unsafe spaces. It's about that line between, here we're saying there's aspects of identity that are not disorders, but yet we need diagnoses to get accommodations because we don't live in a world with universal design. Comment is, why is disability a dirty word? When I bring it up to family, no one wants to talk about it. I'm proud of my child. Yeah. And I think that's common. That's common, so common. And again, the reason I played that ableism video is because, a lot of those euphemisms, like people literally think those are like the thing to do. When I speak to a professional audience, healthcare people or whatever, and I bring up the idea that like special needs is like not what you say, people are like, what do you mean? Like, oh, did you know? So that it's a lot of just, it's brain rules. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Yeah, differently able. Yeah, don't say that, right? It's just people don't know. People don't know. Comment. Thank you so much. Okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you also for so much for coming. But what I'd really like to do is, and I've been thinking about this, is that from a like building a, you know, from the ground up, little kids talking about brains, like I'd really like to do a like a video based, like a media based brain club to show, to like demonstrate neurodiversity through characters that like are so common, like you know, those of you who know me, you know, I'm always talking about how Elsa's autistic. And I'm like, Elsa, me and Elsa, like not you, Elsa, Elsa Princess. So Elsa has a you know, lots of things in common with me. Elsa has sensory processing differences. She really does best in a quiet environment. And Elsa she's, you know, really got her powers of intensity, which allow her to create beautiful things in the world because of that intensity. That is also the same intensity that when she's dysregulated, she has huge explosive dysregulation. When Elsa flips her lid, I mean, oh my gosh, right? But what do? We tell Elsa to put her gloves on and cover her up. Why? Maybe we should just figure out what makes Elsa feel safe and calm. Anyway, like if we just talked about that, it would be not a big deal, but we don't. Or like my child has been watching the Hulk, just got introduced to the Hulk recently today. And I'm watching the Hulk and I'm like, oh, when the Hulk flips his lid, it's mass chaos. Oh, well, that's interesting, right? So, I mean, there's so many examples of this in everyday life that really does name the thing and help people understand the correct narrative, which is that we all have different brains. We all flip our lid. We are not evil and mean and like all and bad. Like we're not those things. This is all over the place. And it's really just that somebody made a brain rule that said that we don't talk about this. So if we talk about this, we won't feel shame. We will realize that we are not alone in the world. And hopefully we'll learn to love our brains. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. I'll send out the recording probably tomorrow.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
You're welcome.